We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Kilgore, and I'd like to welcome you to the May 13th, 2024 Planning and Economic Development Committee remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. And to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. And ladies and gentlemen, we are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have the option for the public to listen live by phone. And for those of you out there with us today, we'd like to welcome you. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 8187. At this time, your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. And at this point, those of you who would like to speak, you need to press *3 to enter into the speaker queue. And at this time, I'd like to do a roll call. I'll go through and introduce the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Councilman staff, as I say your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good afternoon.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hey, everybody.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good afternoon.
Assistant City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Hello, everyone.
Planning and Urban Design Director Stephanie Dahl.
Good afternoon.
Urban Planner 3 Vidila Savitska.
Hi, everyone.
And Development Services Director Mark Matheny.
Good afternoon, all.
Great. And at this time, we'd like to, first thing on our agenda is to approve the minutes for our April 16th, 2024. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second? Can I get a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. This time we'll do a roll call. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Ullman.
Aye.
And myself, aye, and the motion passes. Number 2 on our agenda today will be the missing middle housing reform update. That will be presented by Vidila Savitska, who is our Urban Planner 3. He will give us an update on the status of the middle housing recommendations in regard to the anti-displacement strategies. And that will be for information sharing only today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. We will start with a few key takeaways to go over the key points that we're going to be talking about. Number 1, the City Council requested a review of anti-displacement strategies to occur before considering further changes to housing regulations. Number 2, we wanted to give an overview of the current and proposed possible recommendations for anti-displacement. So we'll review some of the 12 anti-displacement strategies that are currently on the books, and we'll talk about how there are different types of anti-displacement strategies that include production of housing, preservation of housing, and protection of residents. And then third, we are going to talk a little bit about some recommendations that we are proposing for promoting more housing supply, which is one of the recommendations for anti-displacement. And we'll talk about a map to think about considerations for how that could work. So first, at the last meeting on April 23rd, Council requested to put off flag lots and cottage developments to September because there was an interest to talk and to think more about anti-displacement. So we're starting that today. And a key question that we want to engage you all at the end of this presentation is what text amendments, if any, should we be considering before September? Feel free to stop me at any time. So an overview about anti-displacement. This is a definition. I'll just read it. A policy or tool intended to prevent, reduce, or mitigate impacts of displacement of an individual, family, or community. Anti-displacement strategies may employ a spectrum of approaches, such as funding, laws, or incentives. And strategies may be implemented with impacts achieved in the short or more long term. And so here are a couple of examples. Anti-displacement strategies that can be measured on a short term are more like home repair assistance, right? Where potentially a family gets funding relatively quickly to improve some needed damages on their house, like the roof is leaking. Some long-term anti-displacement strategies might be, for example, changing zoning to allow more housing options like middle housing in existing single-family districts. This is an anti-displacement strategy because it's been shown that increasing housing supply has sometimes positive effects on affordable housing, right? Somebody moves from a market rate unit into a nicer unit, and that frees up a more affordable unit. But it's considered a long-term strategy because it takes a long time to get those housing units on the market, right? First, you have to update your zoning. Then you have to have projects that go into planning, permitting, then construction, and that all takes several years. So it's important to know that the long-term anti-displacement strategies are something that we are really wanting to talk about because they take so long to bring on the rolls for housing supply. It makes sense that we try to make those changes early because they take so much time. Now, there are three types of anti-displacement strategies. Really, they talk about production, preservation, and protection of residents. So in the missing middle housing study, this is how it's shown. A house with a plus is more of the production. Holding up the house is the preserving, and with the people inside is protecting a residence. Production has been shown that producing new housing at all price points helps to relieve market pressure. I've heard this metaphor of, like playing musical chairs, right? We all know this game. Providing more housing is like adding a chair to that game, so that when the music stops, everybody sits down. There's another chair there. It's a little bit easier to find a place. Preserving affordable housing can be subsidized, which is a lot of what the city does with our programs, but it can also be naturally occurring. And protection of residents and trying to have programs that protect the most vulnerable residents. So those are typically the three. There's another one that people are talking about, which is kind of planning, which is kind of what we're doing now, talking about where we want to focus our efforts, our funding, and our regulatory changes. So we can kind of add that to the mix if we want to get nerdy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our existing anti-displacement strategies. I know this is a lot of information on a slide. Don't feel like we're going to read it and go through it all, because we're not going to. The real takeaway here for you all and anybody watching is that the city currently has anti-displacement strategies that is employing. Some of them are in tandem with other entities, such as the county, or we get money from the federal government. And we use these different programs to try to create housing supply and preserve it. Anybody who engages with the city to try to get benefits from either a tax benefit or through some grants, usually you have to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. We all know this. And so here's a list of some of them, right? We have land trusts. We have density bonuses, and arguably, maybe these haven't been super successful, but we have them, and in some cases they are being used. One of them listed here is short-term rental regulations, right? We're trying to limit vacation rentals because there's a general understanding that by keeping those housing units on the market for long-term housing, it's a good thing to keep people in homes. And so it really is, it's an anti-displacement strategy, right? Okay, so these are some of the existing strategies that we have, and it's not complete. There are others because we're working with the other departments, and so you might find something that isn't here. Yes, go ahead, Councilman Ullman.
I appreciate this all coming together and just being able to kind of see where the resources are coming from. I think that's really helpful. I will say that when I look at these, it's not directly intuitive that these are all displacement strategies. Like, to me, there's almost a difference between, I mean, we've been doing density bonuses for a lot of different reasons for a long time. And so I'm eager, as we look at proposed anti-displacement strategies, what ones are getting a lot more specific towards our equity goals and the conversations we've been having around who we're talking about displacement, because these existing ones, several of these are more about supply or directly about affordable housing. So what I'm hoping that we can have a conversation this summer leading to the September timeline is about more precise, specific strategies towards this, because some of these are a little bit, I mean, the land trust is very explicit and very directive, and I think that's a great example. But the proportion of effort, time, and money we put to that compared to some of the others looks really different. So I appreciate the breadth that we're showing here and hope that we can get into more direct connection between displacement and the housing.
Okay, definitely. You're right. We have density bonuses for all kinds of reasons. This one that we're listing here specifically says that, well, we passed an ordinance in 2014 that basically says if you choose to build housing on a commercial corridor, we will give you double density if you make 20% of that affordable. So that is specifically tied to affordability. But you're right. There some of these strategies are more directly tied.
But what I'm saying is, like, that's a supply-based strategy and affordable housing-based strategy. And I think that, like, when we're talking about displacement, who are we talking about? Just more precision, that I think that we can't always lump in supply-based strategies with displacement at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that. Okay. Here's a list from the Missing Middle Housing Study of anti-displacement strategies that we aren't currently implementing that we could. So I've titled this proposed. If proposed from the Missing Middle Housing Study, we could also just think of this as recommendations for possible future anti-displacement strategies. Again, this is hard to read in small text, so forgive me for that, but I wanted to sort of show them all on one page. I'll just start by highlighting that there are two here that, again, are supply side strategies that we are pitching to bring to council soon. Some of these have already been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and so they're already ready to go. The first one, the first star there says allow duplexes / subdivision. And what it says is if you allow single family lot splits, that's an anti-displacement strategy, because what you're doing is you're basically taking a property that somebody might have a house on, and if you split that, you're giving them more access to financial tools to be able to build a house on there, which is what we're proposing through this small backyard lot ordinance that we're proposing. We're proposing to expand ADUs, again, to support people on their existing properties to have more access to development and to take advantage of what they already have, potentially for their own children, their families, or relatives, or to rent out to others. And I'm highlighting missing middle housing reform because it is maybe counterintuitive, but what makes middle housing reform anti-displacement, and this is an important pause here, is that middle housing and this whole study has recognized that our path forward should be incentives and policy changes that incentivize more efficient land uses, which is middle housing, right? Multiple structures on the same parcel of land versus single family housing, which is the most expensive type of development that we can see. So as long as we're going to have development, and it's coming, we need to focus on more efficient housing, middle housing, and housing that's compatible with neighborhoods. that adds that type of supply to the mix. Okay, I'm not going to go through the rest of these because there's a lot, and I don't want to get bogged down in that because we have more to talk about. Here's a third. Sorry, these are lots of slides with small text. This is from the Affordable Housing Plan that our partner department, CED, is working on and should be finalized in July. And I'll just highlight here that although they're not calling these anti-displacement strategies, for all intents and purposes, that's what they are. The first three buckets, goal 1 under the orange, goal 2 on blue, and goal 3 are basically production, preservation, and protection of residents. And then goal 4 and 5 are different recommendations for improving general policies for affordability and the sort of the environment and ecosystem for affordable housing programs. I just want to call out that one of their recommendations is more support for policies and plans initiatives that diversify housing choices, such as the missing middle housing study. And so, you know, here we have different departments coming together, kind of saying the same thing. A lot of these are anti-displacement strategies. In fact, a lot of the strategies on this list are redundant. They are part of our existing work. For example, access to legal assistance, expanding home repairs, preserving mobile home parks is actually a recommendation, you know, from the middle housing study. So a lot of these are redundant. And so that's just interesting to see how that's all playing out. Not a surprise. So it sort of leads us back to thinking about, you know, where is it best to roll out new programs and or new policies that will affect housing? And we want to bring your attention and the public's attention on what seems like the strongest nexus to what is rational and logical, and that is the missing middle housing ready map. So basically the blue areas, whether light blue or dark blue, are parts of the city that are more appropriate for middle housing because they are closer to transit, if not on a transit line. They have more infrastructure, tend to have more sidewalks and things like that. And they're closer to goods and services, so closer to where people shop and need to go for their living. And so this is where it makes sense to roll out increased access to housing opportunities. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about changing policy to provide more housing opportunities and where to do it. Now, at the same time that we're looking at this map, this little note at the bottom is really important to consider, which is that Buncombe County has completed their comprehensive plan and they're preparing to roll out changes to zoning. And they've already expressed to us that they are planning to allow for middle housing at the periphery of Asheville. So along all our borders, where our middle housing ready map is basically saying, you know, these are like lower density areas, the Buncombe County is going to allow apartment complexes and triplexes and duplexes and, you know, a higher density than what our middle housing ready map is going to provide. So that leads us down an interesting path when we think about where should we allow more housing options. The answer from Buncombe County is a lot more housing options are coming at the boundary of the city of Asheville. So we need to keep that in mind. All right. One quote that we are calling out from the middle housing report that we just want to highlight here, I'll read it. It says, it should be noted that choosing to not permit missing middle housing in geographically appropriate locations is not a valid anti-displacement strategy. Limiting potentially more attainable housing types in a particular area is likely to have its own exacerbating effects on displacement pressure. Middle housing has an important role to play in a multifaceted approach to reducing displacement pressure. Now, this is just one study, right? It's not perfect, but they're highlighting here that it's really important that we not exacerbate and increase housing pressure. Their recommendation in general is to try to be as broad as you can in these housing changes to provide as many more housing opportunities to everybody, because it's not only certain areas of the city where we've identified more vulnerability. There are people there in parts of the city that, tend to not have vulnerability issues in mass, but that there are people still struggling. So that's one consideration. I just have a couple more slides and then we can have a conversation. So when or if we should bring any UDO amendments to City Council before the fall, I just want to highlight that we have a couple of amendments that have already been reviewed and approved by the P&Z that we've had some back and forth with. One is changes to reducing the minimum off-street parking requirements in the city. They approved that on April 3rd. Another is expansion to ADU policy and creation of a new small backyard lot policy that would effectively allow every property owner to subdivide a small part of their backyard without having any road frontage. The idea is to be ADU-like, because we've heard that some people can't afford an ADU. This would allow certain properties to subdivide and to build structures in the back, or to sell them to somebody who can afford to build them, that are similar in scale to an accessory dwelling unit. So those are all primed and ready to go. We have other amendments that we believe we could have ready should you in council think that they should come forward. One is changing development thresholds, and what that means is basically, should we make it easier for certain projects to move forward without having council review? There's been some discussion about that. We propose to update landscaping and tree canopy because we want to ensure that our tree canopy and our tree regulations are better now before we start to unlock and release the gates for more development, because we know that Ashevilleans really are committed to having a healthy environment. This middle housing choice expansion is really updating residential zoning districts at their DNA level and simplifying the code. So that's going to be something that takes a little bit more time. And updating sidewalk standards. This has to do with improving walkability, which is a key part of both the comprehensive goal of the city of Asheville and what is recommended through the middle housing study in order to have housing that is more viable. So last slide here before we can go into conversation. This is just linking back these currently ready UDO amendments. We can do other things, but these are sort of primed and much more on our, not only primed, but they seem most relevant, right? They have to do with the most specifically housing related and those sort of supplementary housing amendments and how they're related to anti-displacement. And the two that are housing related, ADUs and middle housing choice expansion are specifically anti-displacement strategies. So I realize this is somewhat circular, but it's important to note that this is what's in the recommendation for the middle housing study and a similar recommendation coming from the affordable housing plan. So we think it makes sense to move those forward. And with that, I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Padilla. Well, the first thing I'd like to sort of go back to that last slide you just left. And the ADU and small backyard lots. And as I had discussed earlier, the benefits, this is definitely has so many benefits for anti-displacement. And the reason I say that is because you have a lot of properties here in the city, which basically their size is sort of, they may have 50 road frontage, but yet they go back 100, 150, and sometimes 200 feet deep. And the way the law is written here, there can be only one house there, because it does not have the available lot size to be able to have a flag lot to get to the back lot to build something. So what happened, we have a lot of land that's just sitting there, not being used. This reason this is so good for anti-displacement is because you've got a lot of these properties that are owned by people that basically are forced to sell because they can no longer afford to upkeep their homes. By putting in these type of small backyard lots and being able to subdivide that lot, to being able to subdivide it and sell that lot if possible, if they would like, and they can do the improvements in their homes so they can stay in their homes. So many times by being a realtor, I go to people's homes to sell their homes or whatever, and the homes a lot of times, because they don't have the money to the upkeep, right? Then they're being forced to move because maybe grandma cannot use the stairs and get downstairs or whatever. All kinds of things that could be impacting that family. Now, by doing this and by doing the small lot, because small back lots, what I hear, are able to be financed. Anytime you can finance a lot, then most of the time you can also get the product to put on the property. Banks will use that land as collateral, so that person may not have resources, but they can use that now, the land, and be able to borrow to build a unit for grandma on one level. Then the family can actually live in the larger home. They can also, like I said, sell the lot, get money to fix up the house, to be able to fix up the house, to maybe rent out a room. A lot of times, a lot of homes are in such disrepair, they may have available rooms, but the house cannot be rented because it does not come as up to standards. By using any of these tools, it can put money in their pockets to be able to stay on their property, expand their property, and actually be able to develop generational wealth, because grandma's house that was there, the child is able to use that lot in the back to maybe buy or put a home on it, which that way grandma does not have to sell. You see what I mean? So there's so many different ways. And the reason I try to make it more personable about the grandmas, because what happens, a lot of the homes that I find myself selling are older individuals who have to sell the home. And basically, because they may move in a rest home or they move in an apartment with one level, and then they go to sell the home. And they lose a lot of money a lot of times because of the condition of it. But now they're able to borrow on that lot in the back, fix that house up, put more money into their pockets. There are so many different ways this actually could help now. So I would like to see that move forward as soon as possible. Not sure exactly about a lot of the other tools that we be using as far as, the cottage lots and things like that that's in the future. But I think this is something that the community can benefit from right away. Great anti-displacement. It's just educating the people with what their options are, that they can do these things, different things. That's the only thing I'd like to say. Okay.
Thank you. That's a great summary. I think that in particular, the ADUs and small backyard lots are maybe like the best low-hanging fruit, because it adds so much flexibility to properties that are existing. And we need to find as many flexible changes to housing because we have such a problem.
Yes. Maggie?
Vice Mayor, I really appreciated the way you just talked through that. I think your experience as a realtor, understanding the system, but then actually the human experience that you're talking about of like what this really looks like, just adds a lot of richness to the discussion. I appreciate it a lot. A question, Vidila, can you just double back on this middle housing choice expansion? That sounds great. I love those words together, but can you remind me again in a little bit more detail? Is this where it looks like you're saying that there's a package that you'll pull together around zoning and regulatory changes? My guess is that a lot of the conversation, or this spring, we've been having a lot of conversation about cottage courts and flag lots, and we asked to pause so we could step back, take a bigger picture, and come back with this in the context of displacement. Is this middle housing choice expansion where flag lots and cottage court would be bundled within, and there'd be other things in a package? Am I interpreting that correctly? And if I missed the boat, can you just tell me again what those really cool words sound like, what they actually look like?
Good question. We haven't defined specifically. There's a lot that we have kind of on deck that we're planning for, but because it seems like there's been a little bit of a logjam that we're not able to pass these ordinances that keep kind of getting pushed. It kind of keeps us in a standing pattern. Effectively, this is looking at updating this is the bread and butter of the missing middle housing studies recommendations. Update and simplify your zoning regulations in residential districts to reduce your barriers for housing. That's really what it is. And we can, once we go in there and put forth some ideas that the community can have for conversation, we can, add and subtract depending on how much conversation there needs to be about one thing. But in a nutshell, it's about updating residential zoning standards.
Okay, so it does sound like it will be a package of a variety of things that are technical adjustments. And I want to speak to the logjam. I don't know that we've had a logjam. I feel like we've had a listening jam where we got the missing middle study. It's enormous. And then we started seeing zoning changes, and we have not had the conversation as a community and as electeds around what does displacement even mean and what strategies are there. Like, yes, I read the whole study in great detail, but I think that's what I think when I've been saying I want to wait till September, when we had asked to wait till April, it wasn't because of like, I have huge appetite for all these changes, but I want us to make sure that we're understanding and discussing. I mean, even today, right now, this explicit conversation of we see some of these things as our primary displacement strategies. That's how I'm interpreting this presentation, that the primary strategies of the whole suite of displacement are these, or are you saying that these are the first ones we should tackle? I guess I'm getting a little lost in some of that as well. And that's the listening jam that we've been asking for, is like, let's pause, let's have the public catch up with the deep technical knowledge of all of our professional planners and really get clear on what are displacement strategies, what are the most strategic ones to approach, and what ones happen first. And I still am not sure if what you're sharing here, these are the best, most strategic, or these are the ones to happen first. Like some of that I'm still trying to tease apart.
Let me just say one thing before Councilman Turner and Steph go. One thing that sort of drove us to create and work on ADUs and small backyard lots was this push from the citizen-led initiative for flag lot adjustments and cottage standards, because what those were about weren't about primarily middle housing. It was about how to take advantage of existing lots. And so going into that conversation, just to give you some of the backstory, we wanted to see what is the spectrum of housing opportunities for existing properties with homes on them, because the bulk of Asheville, as you know, we already have homes. The middle housing is really about the few vacant lots and the long-term strategy as prices go up and houses are demolished or there's burned down and stuff. So that's what led us to that. And it seems like it's, for that reason, it's a great opportunity to make those regulatory changes now, because we have thousands of parcels that could take advantage of those incrementally over time, to not have a jarring effect on any one particular area in the city.
Just one quick follow-up. You're saying, I got a little lost again of like, you're saying that there's some proposed, the timing you just brought up is if you're saying that you want us to consider things before September, but on our April meeting, we said we wanted to wait till September. I guess I just got a little lost on what you were inferring there.
Well, that's part of, I think, our conversation here was to ask, if you remember the first question, do you council members want us to do anything until September, as far as we have some regulatory adjustments like these that have been already approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission? Do you want to see any of those before September? If not, I guess we can talk about what kind of work you want us to be focusing on and what kind of conversations.
Ooh, can I segue off that?
Yes.
Because this is where I'm getting to ultimately. I'm very excited about doing all this. It took this council's momentum and work with housing in recent years to say, we really need this. We need a broader study. We need infill. We need better overall regulations. And I think there's so much information coming towards us, but there is a lack of a cohesive strategy of how to attack it and piece it out. And it's kind of overlapping what y'all are saying, because I'm hearing from staff, look, we really want to get to these things on the screen, but you all council have this other thing that's been kind of bogging down the process. And then over here on council, I'm saying, these things are bogging down the process because we're so far past due on them. Like, we're not on the same timeline. And maybe it would help, but can you go back up to the slide where all of the affordable housing plan, that. And so right now we've highlighted the one that we're talking about, but I wonder if it would make more sense for even this committee or housing or someone with council members on it to sort this in priorities with some logistical things like, for this one to happen, the other one has to happen first, like you've been saying today. But if that might not help us flush out when there's political will to do something versus comprehension of what the community already knows, like, it's a little bewildering to me. We as a council have been talking about trying to raise the threshold limits of 49 and 99 and doing a community benefits table. We've talked about it at retreats and so on, but we're getting that information through P&Z as they are bringing it up in meetings on their own. So it's like, I'm not sure where to attack the plan from. And I think we have wonderful staff, but I wonder if we could be doing this a little more cohesively and that there would be clear stages does anybody else feel that? Like, I'm not sure what direction we're working from and they're out of time sequence.
Stephanie?
Sure. Thank you, Councilwoman. I just wanted to note that this overall question about where's that, cohesive strategy that we need to see, we're hoping that is what comes to you in September. It might also look like we're asking you at that very same meeting to consider adopting some ordinances, but it is a process, and it is going to require some input from council members, and it's going to require input from Planning and Zoning Commission members, Legacy Neighborhoods, PAN,
Sure.
NAC, all of that. So I appreciate the frustration. We are having, a work session at the end of this month, a public work session with the Planning and Zoning Commission to have a deeper dive conversation on this. And what I'd say is, you're asking a great question, and our staff is ready and willing, if council and the mayor work with city manager's office to say, we need to have some kind of work session, or, I heard a new term, what was it? A study session, something like that, around anti-displacement strategies. Maybe it happens before you have a work session on the affordable housing plan, so that those things kind of feel like sensical moving forward. Like, we're building information one piece on top of each other, and we're actually getting the input that we need from you to be able to prioritize what you're interested in. Because, just the bottom line for some of these strategies, when we're talking about anti-displacement strategies, the supply obviously is just one of them, but the other pieces are programmatical, and they're going to require a different level of investment from council, different kinds of policy decisions around funding amounts and partnerships.
And I appreciate all that stuff. I just don't understand, like, maybe, and it might just be the way my brain is thinking on this, but we've never really sat down and said, what 20 things on this list do we want to try and tackle first? What do we already have partnerships on that we can do? And I assume maybe y'all are doing that. And that's why you're sending us certain pieces in the way you are. And maybe that's what this work session will do. Will we look at this kind of document and say, we really want to focus on geographic down payment assistance? And that might be more important than inventorying all existing housing property, affordable housing. I just don't know where we.
I think that is correct.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Chair Kilgore.
So that work session.
I was just going to say, for me, I'm just saying, I was listening to all this, and it is a lot. It's a lot. And I do like the idea of biting off, maybe, like you said, it's so much. Even if we have the work sessions and then we plan and then we line, this is a lot of time, energy in his work, and didn't we present that back to the people? What I was seeing, Padilla was basically speaking about, let's do little things. We still gonna work on all the rest, but maybe we need to start doing little things and start getting them in the works, because we can, and that's what I see in them saying that the ones that they already approved for planning and zoning, maybe that's like one step. See, why should that one step wait for all these different things? Because this is going to take time. This is a lot of work.
Sure.
And we can't just keep putting off doing anything, because we're not.
I'm not saying that at all either, Sandra, but is the Planning and Zoning Commission now then prescribing how we're going to tackle these strategies and plans?
No. We're only talking, I'm only talking about.
Well, but that's what we're getting right now. We're getting the Planning and Zoning Board's work sessions, and they've got their own ideas, and some of them are great.
No, I'm just saying, I thought Padilla was only asking us to speak on the two things that he wanted to possibly move forward. Then we can deal with the other stuff later. Was that what you're talking about, Padilla?
Well, there's a few, yeah. So, and some of this is what the P&Z is working on. Residential, we're getting emails about it, like
Yeah,
the,
so it's only two things that they talked about that we make and move forward. Even if we don't, and I thought that's what we were looking at, trying to move something forward and still work on the larger picture.
yeah, and that's my only point is I'm not sure when we're doing what, but if the work session is going to help us flush that out, that'll solve it for me. But like we know now that planning and zoning is trying to has suggested moving the threshold to 100,000 square feet for residential. Is that coming to council soon? Because P&Z just reviewed it, or is that like in a calendar somewhere? I'm getting a little lost personally.
Okay. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe
I don't know that I need an answer today. I just
no,
trying to understand the broader process.
maybe I'm just sort of misunderstanding what conversation we were having today. It was only about a couple of things, not all the other factors, because that's the stuff we have to hash out.
So when do we give input? When do we give input instead of review what we're being given? I guess is really the question.
I think there are a couple points. I think that it's going to be at PED, but we're also not planning on just going to PED. So right now, as I mentioned, Councilwoman Ullman asked me on April 23rd, will you also go to committees, plural? So right now we're exploring that option of making sure that we can get input from more than just PED. That's one. We do want to try to make this chunked. So what Padilla is really, or our team is asking you today, one is like, are you like giving us nods that you understand there's a whole suite of anti-displacement options, and that right now our chunk that we're focusing on, and to answer Councilwoman Ullman's question, it is supply. It is not because that is the only one that we're focusing, but it is because this is the one that pairs with and matches well with the point of the missing middle housing report, which was to remove barriers to supply. So we might also be coming with other options to look at how we can induce supply, but that is not necessarily where our emphasis is going to be. So I know, and maybe we need to have, this larger discussion. There's PED, there's other committees. We do this in bite-sized chunks. We potentially have a work session where I absolutely hear you, Councilwoman Turner, where you say that council needs to let us know which one of these they think are priorities, and we've got to figure out when that happens. But it might need to happen a little bit later when you all see that affordable housing plan, so that there's a fuller foundation and context for that. So we had planned on coming to PED multiple times so that we could get multiple pieces of input from you all as we move towards September. And the second piece of this, one last thing, is that we're looking for just this, here's where we're headed. It's a process. We're headed to September. We're focusing on supply because that's what missing middle is targeted on as far as goals. But the second piece of this was a question around do you want us to wait on any type of ordinance change that could be suggested at this time? Or because we heard that direction, right? We heard that direction about cottage clusters and flag lots. We want to confirm with you, and I know this isn't the full council, but we wanted to confirm and get a temperature around, Does that mean you don't want to look at reviewing development threshold, review of the development thresholds between now and September? Does that mean you don't want to look at landscaping updates that impact residential building across Asheville until September?
Not necessarily to me.
Oh,
Go ahead, Sandra.
I was talking with the bill I had seen it.
Oh.
So I was just,
Well, and can I just clarify stuff? Because one of the things I thought we were building towards with September is the potential for, as we've called it several things, a potential geographic overlay, a potential preservation district, whatever it might be that we were talking about for some legacy neighborhoods. But what I'm inferring from this presentation is you're saying, that's not really a protection method, and that maybe that's not what you're recommending. Because so you're just is this where we need to be telling you that as council, I've heard pretty strongly that folks want some kind of preservation and protection for those legacy neighborhoods?
This is great. This is the meat.
This is the point of okay. That's what we're trying to boil
meat.
down to today, that specific thing.
Absolutely. So here's a meaty question. What we are saying is that based on the data that we have as professional planners, what makes sense is to try to support additional housing options in the place that are missing middle ready. And Vigila, I'm going to ask you to show this map one more time. It does not mean that it's going to look like these places are where we incentivize it, but this is the starting point of our analysis. This is where we have the infrastructure. This is where that it's walkable and people can get on transit. And this would mean this is where housing makes sense. It is not necessarily going to be something that is exactly aligned with what some other people might be seeing, but we are seeing let's have a positive, let's induce housing, more housing options in certain places, and we are not saying that we want to put in an overlay where we're not allowing certain things. That is not what we're recommending to you at this time.
And if the neighborhoods are already speaking out against that, and council has been voicing their concern for that, this is our attempt to reconcile it through these committee meetings.
This is exactly right. This is one of the.
Do we have a map of those legacy neighborhoods over this map?
Yes, we can provide that for you. I can tell you right now that the legacy neighborhoods do not, obviously, let's talk about the Burton Street neighborhood in West Asheville. It's an extraordinarily walkable area. It's close to goods and services, and it does not have all the infrastructure it needs, but it does have infrastructure that can support housing. So there is a mismatch between where we should be incentivizing additional housing and where places might be physically ready to it. So there's a map that shows places that might be vulnerable based on the people that live there now. And there's a map that shows where places might be physically ready. And we're analyzing those.
And if I can add to this mix a little bit, we conducted a poll. It's not an outright survey, but we conducted a poll to get at one of the questions for one of these amendments to open up backyard lots. And it was pretty evenly split. Basically out of 1,000 people, half want less ability to have development in backyards, and half wanted more development, to have that right to build a backyard cottage. Interestingly, people who weren't homeowners actually wanted it a lot more. So we do have some interesting data. I'll also just highlight, I don't think this answer was given here. When we're looking at possible, there is a lot of information here. So let's just acknowledge that a lot of cities are struggling through all this, and it's complicated. I would add that we have so much to do that we should be wary of, trying to get every single change in the exact precise, way that maybe every single person wants it. I'm all like, it makes sense to get as much consensus as we can, but let's keep in mind that almost a year has gone by since this middle housing study has been completed, and housing is a big issue here. So All of these amendments that are on this page here, each one of them to go through planning and zoning and then to council will involve significant community conversation. So it might be difficult to bring like a whole package to you at once. It probably would be more viable to break things up. Otherwise, every P&Z meeting or council meeting is going to be a 4-hour meeting on one package, and we're going to be superficial on all the issues. So those are just a couple of other thoughts to throw around.
So is this the only time PED is going to talk about this specifically? Because I just have a couple requests.
Yeah,
I
I
would like to request the map overlay of these particular neighborhoods we've been talking about and where they fall on this middle housing readiness map. And then if there's additional info that you could pull just from the GIS layer, whether how much acreage it equals or something. And then maybe we can highlight our major corridors too.
So what I'm trying to figure out, okay, I understand what you're saying about the overlay. Okay, I'm trying to feel, how will that overlay impact the backyard lot proposal? But they'll have just.
So as we're proposing the backyard lots, these would be changes to ADUs across every residential zoning district, and it would expand housing options in every single zoning district, in every residential zoning district. If we were choosing to carve out certain neighborhoods that would not have more housing options, which is what I hear, that would exclude some neighborhoods and some people from being able to access additional housing options. That would limit their housing choices. That's not the recommendation. I hear that some people are talking about that. We're really concerned about that moving forward because it is really problematic. Even let's say if we passed a map that only allowed some of Asheville to take advantage of additional housing options, then it would make it much more difficult for those other parts of the city to opt in. They would have to go through a rezoning themselves. If let's say one family or a couple of families wanted to have those backyard housing lots, they would actually have to go through a whole rezoning process. And we know how difficult that is. So there's a lot of concern about limiting more housing options. The whole reason that we spent extra resources on the anti-displacement strategy was to ensure that we can provide more, especially for different, sort of more vulnerable parts of the city. And what the report says is what you should do there is roll out anti-displacement strategies, but don't, limit the housing there, which will potentially make the problem more difficult.
And what I will say, and I want to add to that, and a lot of times people don't understand the benefit of something until they've actually seen it in motion and see what it can do. But when you just talk about these things, they do look scary if people don't really understand the actual impacts. If by doing this, like you said, protecting, putting the overlay where they can't, what you're actually doing, and I'm just going to tell you this, you're causing gentrification to escalate. Okay? I'm just telling you, you're causing gentrification to escalate when you take away the option of the backyard cottages to some of those developments, because these are communities that I work in all the time, where a lot of vulnerable people live. And they ask me about these services all the time. What can I do here? I hear it all the time. So what you're doing by doing that, you're making it harder for them to have access to financing, to funding, to actually expand their own properties. You're limiting them. And that in essence will actually end up, like I said, causing gentrification more rapidly to occur in these communities by doing that. And I think that I don't know, Sage, if you'd like to chime in, but I'm just telling you.
Well, I guess it's just procedurally confusing to me because the flag lots and cottage clusters came to us twice, almost 3 times, and each time council as a whole let staff know we wanted to see some of this potential overlay, conservation, preservation, whatever district, whatever it was, legacy neighborhood protections, we'll call it that, before we saw the flag lots and the cottage. We wanted them in that order. And that is literally why we didn't hear it. So now, are we going to be creating that option for review, or are we just plowing ahead pretending like council didn't say that, and we're just going to try and educate on these just anti-placement strategies to get us to the hopes where we'll adopt wide?
What my understanding is council has been saying we want to have an understanding of what displacement strategies methods we'll use. For example, an overlay. And I think some people have burrowed into that idea more than others. I'm very curious to see what it would look like. And I've been asking staff, and staff is telling us right now, they are not recommending an overlay. They think that an overlay wouldn't be effective. And so I think, to me, we've been saying, like, we want to talk of displacement. We want to talk about displacement. That message got like a little muffled at some point, perhaps. And Cottage Court kept coming in front of us. And so I think what I'm hearing now is that they don't think an overlay is the best approach. I do think there is a missing link here that gets back to a point that you'd had earlier, Sage, of like, I just was combing through the Missing Middle study. There's a long list of displacement strategies. And staff, you were saying, these are the 2 ones I want you to do right now. But I do think that that's a little out of context of council looking at both the affordable housing plan strategies and the displacement, because what I think is really missing here is we want to be doing programmatic and regulatory fixes to address housing affordability. We want to be doing affordable housing program, displacement programs, and we want to be doing stuff to get out of the way so we get better supply, but it's being like chunked out in ways that
only thing I could say is I think that when we start talking about the cottage clusters, and we start talking about the flag lots, a lot of times those particular tools do not actually benefit single family owners. Okay, those are a lot of times they're developers, they're trying to whatever. But the backyard lot, all I'm saying is the backyard lots can actually benefit now individual homeowners who are struggling, or individual homeowners that wish to expand, or individual homeowners who do not want to be displaced out of their home. That is a tool they can use now because they're able to have access to financing, they're able to have access to separate deeds, and those are all tools they can use right now. Okay, and that's what so I don't want to start, the other things, like I said, that he said we can talk about later. I'm just trying to, if you really want to help people, and the reason I would just tell you that, I just sold a property just last month where they were able to subdivide the backyard. The owner was able to use the money from the backyard that they sold to fix up the home that they have that the parents are in, so their parents do not have to move. Okay, and they were able to take care of some other financial responsibility. This is a tool that we can use right now if you want to help, the vulnerable community. I'm just saying that's something you can do. And we can sit here and debate all these things. It's going to take months and months of talking about and getting it in place. And, and then I'm just saying, and that was the only reason when he brought that up, that was something we could use now to show that we're actually doing something. And when you start clustering all this stuff in together, we keep on and on. I think it's better if we do sort of just do things that we can and still move on to look at the entire picture. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. And Sandra, I agree. I mean, these are all great housing policies. I really want us to even do 2 ADUs, really. My concern is that it's going to go all this way and then have the same end, which is council isn't ready to support it. So maybe that's what you're doing. You're polling us. So I'll just say, for my own sake, there are a lot of places to grow in the city right now. And if there are a handful of legacy neighborhoods who have coalesced and come to us and come with a request, and they are legacy, historic Black neighborhoods, and they do not want us to upzone them particularly, I am going to still have concerns about this and look at ways to protect them other than me saying to them, I believe it will be good for you. Do you know what I mean? Like we can educate as much as we want, but I still feel that pressure when these legacy neighborhoods and the coalition comes to us and say, help protect us from this. We're not ready for this. And maybe in my fanatical idealism, one day there will be ways for these legacy neighborhoods to build in the ways that they want, but there are not those parameters now. And maybe we're preserving it for that. So if you're polling via these meetings, I still have concerns, and I still am supporting my other colleagues that are not here in this meeting right now in this request for protections for these legacy neighborhoods as we expand housing throughout the city. I know that in an ideal world, it may not be the strongest play to bring as much housing as possible to the community. But we also have some other factors in play, historical issues that have created legacy distrust and legacy issues in these neighborhoods. So I'm just sharing that for my opinion is still on that side right now. I haven't given up on the fact of protecting them merely to push this forward.
Yeah, I understand and I hear you. I do. And I think that's just because of the lack of information that we've actually, and education that we've actually too. And that is there. And
maybe neighbors will become informed and change, and maybe they will say to us, please do this by September. That would be wonderful, but I don't sense that is coming. And I'm now understanding that's really what you're asking us today. And I'm still trying to figure out where to plug into the whole planning process. So just on this, that's where I still stand.
Janice, Janice, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Janice?
Sorry. I can let Councilwoman Allman speak first, but at some point, Sage, I want to address an idea of overlay for the legacy neighborhoods and a little bit of a legal issue that might be with that. I think there's some things that we can support. So I'll speak to that. I don't want to interrupt.
We don't know the language yet. Overlay, conservation, whatever it is, historic, there's all these terms.
Basically, what I've told planning and zoning is that, clearly in the Missing Middle study, it talks about particularly vulnerable areas, and that's that map. I do think there would be legally defensible to say, leave those areas out, say, because they are vulnerable. Not because they are legacy neighborhoods and, historically Black neighborhoods. That's not defensible. But there's a high correlation between those areas, obviously, and most of the legacy neighborhoods. So it might not be the whole legacy neighborhood, but just so that's the only legal caution that I have said about that. Also, that it's much easier to upzone. You can't. Down zoning is a very difficult process. So you leave it out and they later upzone. That's a little, as Vidila said, that can still be difficult, but
the opposite could be a taking. And this, it's complicated. And I don't know, we haven't identified those right words, but protecting some of these more vulnerable legacy areas, we can wrap the words around it. But
I guess for me, after looking at some of the anti-displacement recommendations, I'm trying to figure out the only thing that I saw in there that actually protect people and keep them in their homes was the repair. I think it was the repair program. Okay, that's good. So what else do you all think? I've been trying to wrap my head around how that's going to actually, what else can help legacy neighborhoods?
And assistance.
Well, this is where, let me jump in here. Like, here's something that I would like to see. I understand that, Sandra, I agree with you that the zoning conversation, the regulatory conversation staff is bringing us are things that I'm interested in for displacement purposes. I'm also interested in seeing things that are not just regulatory fixes. I'm interested in programmatic fixes. What I mean by that is when we look at things like tenant protection and eviction legal assistance, that's a recommendation from the Missing Middle Housing Study. Now, I understand that might not be something that we're the lead agency on. Maybe Pisgah Legal plays that. I'm not really sure, but I think that there are a bunch of other things that community members might feel more connected to support them staying in homes, staying in community that aren't just regulatory. And when I've been saying, I want to make sure that we're looking at regulatory forms with displacement studies, I'm curious in non-regulatory displacement methods, several of which foreclosure assistance is another recommendation from the Missy Middle study. Streamlining approval for affordable housing. And my understanding is we already do that. And so I think there might be some mix too, where there's a cross-departmental conversation, right? And we're hearing what you guys do so well, right? You're our zoning experts, and I'm excited about the ones that you're bringing towards us, but there's other things outside of zoning and regulatory fixes that I'd be curious in at least having the conversation about, but those are not coupled in. And I think that this challenge that some community well, let me say this differently. Zoning is a really cool tool and I'm a real big nerd about it, but there's other things that community members might get more excited about or might feel that they might connect to them better that aren't just zoning. And right now I'm only hearing the zoning solutions.
I guess, Maggie, you're right. All the things you're talking about, foreclosure prevention, all those things, these are all things that we do now. They have programs now doing that. I thought what we're trying to do is actually figure out a way that the zoning can actually affect people and help people as far as staying in their homes, owning their homes, not rental assistance. We've got programs like that. Oh, sure, those are wonderful. My concern with the zoning is being able to keep as many vulnerable people in their communities, having to be able to stay in their homes, because I see them losing them every day. And that's all I'm telling you. They're losing them every day. I'm selling them. Other people are selling them. And I'm just trying to find something that can sort of stop the bleeding now and help the people that can use this tool. That's all I'm saying.
I want that too. And I think the fact that we've had trouble moving this conversation with full council support is because we need something to be rounded out a little bit more. And I want these to move forward. And so I'm trying to strategize on what other things can round this out a little bbit more.
Okay, what other things? It's all about finances. It's all about capital. Depends on capital. Sure, we can do all these things if we have the capital. We can. I'm trying. If we don't have the capital, we have to use the tools that we do have in our house to use now. We cannot. I mean,
and we have bonds coming. Let's flush these conversations out.
But how much fun? Sage, the thing is, what we're talking about is, like I said, I'm just trying to stop the bleeding. You keep on beating.
I love the passion for stopping the bleeding. I really do.
And we just can keep on talking about these things and talking about these things where people are being impacted every day, and you can make a difference. That's all I'm saying. We have a tool that can make a difference, and we're not using it because we're discussing all these esoteric, just things in general. And granted, those things do have to be discussed. But I'm saying that we can do both. We can do both at the same time. We can stop the bleeding and still work on all these other things that we're talking about. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yes, thank you, Matilda. Does anyone else have any questions? I guess we want to move on to the next discussion, right? I guess I'm so passionate about that. And I tell you the reason why is I'm doing it every day, all day out here. And I see it. And I see it. And I guess for those of you who do not see it and everything, it's easy to talk about stuff and look at numbers, but I see it every day happening. I see people, lives that can be impacted and saving their homes right now.
And Sandra, specifically, you mean that in some of these legacy neighborhoods, if they could sell their backyard lot or if they could have a rental, that would save them being in their home?
It's all kinds, all of that.
And the bleeding to you is people that are being literally forced to sell for economic reasons or peak market reasons or something. That's
exactly right.
In the neighborhood. And then if there were twice as many things to build or sell, that would somehow slow it down.
Exactly. Yes. And like I said, I do it every day. I mean, I had a lady call me today, the same thing. Right. I mean, all these, I see it every day, Sage, and I can't tell them, no, well, guess what? You have this option of doing this. Wow, you mean I can do that? Yes, you can do that. You can stay in your home. That's a tool that I can use and a lot of coaches can use right now for people While we
I
sit-
just worry about us getting all the way to the dais and it not happening, just like when Kmart Plaza and Emma came to us and said, please don't put housing here. It will gentrify us and the housing behind here. Please put a furniture store and a grocery store instead of housing. So, and in that way, and council all supported protecting that. So part of me is like, we on PED could talk about these idealistic policies all the time. We'd probably all get behind them. By the time it gets to full council and neighborhood input, we're hearing so clearly from legacy neighborhoods raising their hands for help that I don't feel like I can be the person that says,
because you got to understand, Sage, this is all new. The idea of subdividing a lot and being able to go to the bank and sell it and get money for it, or either use it as a financing tool to put a house on it or put a unit, that's just new. That's new. They haven't heard about it. We're just hearing about it. So it's important to us to use the tools that we know that can help them and let them know how. When I bet if you let people know how something can impact their lives, you're going to see it different. So that's all I'm saying.
So here's a good question then, staff. What is the neighborhood outreach in these situations about these policies right now and until September?
So I'll jump in and say that we are going to be meeting with a lot of different neighborhoods separately. We're already continuing to meet with legacy neighborhoods. We're meeting with them again on May 22nd to talk about anti-displacement, and Dogwood Health Trust will be at that meeting as well. So there's a ton of stuff going on around community engagement. But what I wanted to let you know is that our staff across departments is meeting to have a conversation about what we're doing and how this all fits together. And we're also working on developing educational materials. So this would look like brochures and posters, potentially a story map, maybe something on our website or a small videos that kind of lay the foundation for what is already happening and what can you take advantage of in our community around anti-displacement, and trying to tie that into specific groups, like if you're a renter or if you're a homeowner, if you live in certain areas, if you're a legacy resident, all of that kind of thing. So that is a big piece of our engagement, as well as the normal piece of just trying to work together to find alternative text amendments that might help achieve the variety of goals that we're being asked to meet across neighborhoods. It looks like a lot of meetings, Sage.
Yeah, and I don't want us to get all the way to the end and not get it. So,
I'm wondering if I wonder if we just need to have another conversation next month at PED. I feel like we just opened a lot of questions, but I don't know if we're going to answer them all today. Just want to put that out there, that I almost feel like I have a bunch of additional things I want to say, but I don't know. I wonder if we're getting what we need today. We just need to pause and regroup on PED next month.
Well, those vulnerable area map and legacy neighborhood maps would help. Overlays with, even if they were shape files I could play with, major corridors. Because some of the stuff that we say is we want transit-oriented development. Where are the major corridors and correspondence with these blue maps, and where are legacy boundaries? And that at least we've got something I can look at.
We can provide all that. One last question I'll raise, because we didn't get to it. Sorry, we're going over time. Is would council be okay with us bringing these housing supportive text amendments forward? If we're not moving forward in these other ones, can we begin bringing forward landscaping and tree canopy preservation forward? If we can get rid of some of this backlog, it'll help us to get them off our plate, potentially, assuming they move forward and have more time for the housing related stuff that may take more time.
I think so, Vidila. I'm curious if there's an opportunity for us to weigh in on tree canopy stuff, or is that just something that a study is going to be done and brought to us?
No, we have UDO amendments that are, getting primed and ready.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Thank you, Vidal. Okay, well, we'll move on to the third item on our agenda. It's the One Stop 2.0 affordable housing permitting priorities. Mark Matthew, Development Services Director, who will give us an update on the restructuring of development services, the implementation of the new permitting technology software, and affordable housing permitting prioritization. Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, tremendous. Thank you so much. Good afternoon again. So here's something a little different. And so this is generated from a couple of different things. One of them, I just want to give people an update. This is kind of a road show that I'm doing, through our departments and kind of into the community, and then also so you guys can be aware of that. It's kind of that one-stop 2.0 concept. And then the second half of this presentation is all one presentation, and I'll have a slide that stops us and for questions, but you're certainly welcome to raise your hand and ask questions as we go through here. It's pretty brief, so it's just an overall summary. But the second half was actually a question, and I'm sorry it's so late, but it was probably last fall maybe, where during I think it was a PED meeting, a conversation, just a question came out as to where kind of that expedite concept or where that prioritization of affordable housing permitting, where does that live now, right? And so we're going to touch on that, and just so you guys can have kind of a general update. Okay, Katie, next slide, please. So we're going to start with a one-stop 2.0 concept. And so our key takeaways is, we were originally established to consolidate departmental review functions, in a predictable and an improved review process. And I'm going to give you a super quick history slide here in a minute. That was at one point. Obviously, we felt significant change worldwide with COVID-19 and how everything works now in the current time. And so we did take a hard look at what that looks like, the products we were providing, the services that we were providing. And then, we didn't even realize that we could function and operate successfully in a hybrid world. And that's where we are right now. And so while we're there, we also want to figure out what improvements we can do for that. And then, a big piece of this is certainly the review process, but we've contracted with a fantastic, basically web-based permitting platform that's going to allow a lot more flexibility and a lot more visualization. And I'll touch on that pretty quickly as we come through here. Next slide, please. So One-Stop 1.0, which, I don't think anything is ever called 1.0, right? Except maybe Microsoft things, because they know they're going to change, but we certainly didn't know that. Back in 2006, some of you may remember, some of you had never heard of it, so I just wanted to touch on this slide. Blue Ribbon Task Force was created just to identify, we had kind of a significant shift in the development within our community. And so there were a lot of fragmented pieces that just weren't coming together very well. So a Blue Ribbon Task Force was pulled together from the entire community to really define, what the steps are. And what that did is that evolved in 2009 into the Development Services Center, the DSC. And the concept there was two concepts: is to really kind of co-locate within the same area the different functions that are relative to development. And that's of course reviews and permitting and that sort of thing, fee collection and those concepts. And that's the first time we were really labeled as the one-stop center. And then and the interesting thing at that point is that was different departments under different directors located in a similar location, in a one-stop location. And then in 2013, that evolved into the Development Services Department, which put all those disciplines under a single director, which is what the Development Services Department has been up until very recently. Okay, next slide. And so our One-Stop 2.0 vision is just as it says, provide exceptional service while guiding our community to project success in a hybrid work environment. I'm sure all of you guys know the dynamics that come with a hybrid environment. And it's very interesting. Honestly, before we got to COVID, probably 18 and 19, I just couldn't ever imagine how a government that functions the way we do there's any possibility for hybrid environment. Honestly, I'm a big fan. Done right, I'm a big fan. So that's our vision for One Stop 2.0. Next slide, please. This is just a fun slide because it doesn't make any sense, right? It's confusing. So, and I won't go through it. You can just see what that is. So with that in your mind, next slide. That's just it. Development is complex, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of regulatory functions that are all required pieces, and they all are necessary to provide that level of community that we all really want to enjoy. My favorite part, this is honestly probably my favorite slide. My favorite part is the third line down there where we combine staff expertise with technology and a shared standard and a shared understanding of what expectations and standards are is really the key to success, right? So I just love that concept that we're going to take the technical experts that we have, we're going to update our technology into current, very agile and mobile. And I'm just going to use that word transparent because everybody loves that keyword. And then also identify the common grounds, and I'll touch on that, what that means in a little bit, really is the key to success. And so within that bubble, we identified Clarity is our online permitting platform. We're under contract with that, and we're going to move forward. I'm going to get you a little bit more info on that in just a second. An accessible, equitable customer service, shared customer service standards, and standard review timeframes. Next slide, please. This is another one of my favorite graphics, same one I have on my board behind me that everybody gets to see when they listen to me speak. So this is really the development, right? So we have kind of a hub and satellite concept where a central location, so we still have that one stop, right? So we still have a central location where ultimately, if you need something done and you have an application and you have a review and you pay a fee and you get a permit, the idea is let's keep that just as that one-stop shop. Let's keep that in a central location. And so that's the idea. And then the surrounding pieces are basically the satellites of that hub and satellite concept. And these are all the departments that we work with and the sub divisions within those departments as we go through permitting. Almost all of these are affected as far down as a single family home and all the way up to, the recent hospital expansion. Pretty much the same core of people, just a lot of different moving pieces. So that's our hub and satellite. Next slide, please. And once again, don't have to kind of go through all of that. There's a lot of information on there. The reality of it is our community, our customers, and they don't have to be our customers, right? It's our community. So you don't have to have applied for a permit if you want to find out development or permitting information. Because the nice thing about this new software is it basically creates kind of a dashboard concept, and the community, and certainly our customers who do actually get permits and have multiple projects happening at the same time, they can build their own custom dashboard. But we can see the same thing from our end. A lot of times there's a big difference between back of the house and front of the house. And that's where a lot of questions and concerns and uncertainties come up. And we just want to level that out. We just want to remove kind of that unknown. And this is going to allow us to do that. Next slide, please. And of course, in our hybrid world, there's a lot of different ways to access staff. There's a lot of different ways to access out into the community. And the real idea here is to just kind of centralize and just identify, all these different methods. Is there a central way or a common way that no matter what department you're in, no matter what location you're in, are you physically in the office? Are you at your home office? Are you out on a hotel at a conference? There should be a way that we would expect to respond and be able to activate and work with our customers. Next slide. And so we've done a couple of things to do that. And this happened really before our structural changes. This was post-COVID, where our multiple work groups within the different divisions and different teams, we basically built two things. One of them was a customer service agreement, which is, it's a lot going on, so I'm not going to share it like page by page to read it. But ultimately what it identifies is, how you treat a customer, right? And the bottom line is you should treat them well, right? I know it's a pretty simple concept, but sometimes simple and easy aren't the same thing. And so, what we want to do is we really want to kind of identify the best way to provide that high quality customer service, because we still want to, just like our vision, we want to provide that best service to get them through a complicated process in the most efficient manner that we can. And one of the other things that we developed through that process was kind of categorizing our customers, tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 customers. Tier 1 being somebody who has no idea what they're doing. They just DIY'd TV, home improvement TVs all weekend long. They've never swung a hammer in their life. And then they want to come in and, build a deck and a spa and an addition to their house and make it all out of aluminum. And, and then the next customer at the highest level is somebody who's already in the mix, right? Somebody who's already heard from plan review and already has a process to get to that successful piece. And then in the middle is kind of that somebody who does know, they're just struggling over maybe the code or our ordinances, and how do we help them? And the reason why this is important is we can identify what the handoff for each of these customers are, right? When somebody who has no idea what they're doing, we can kind of get them into the right place right away to make them get to that customer 2 and customer 3. And a customer 3 person doesn't need to spend a lot of time with people who are just basically helping them and allowing them to kind of find forms. They have very specific questions and very specific needs. So that's kind of where that concept comes from. And next slide, please. And the other thing that we've done, there's 2 visuals here, the top and the bottom. The bottom is buckets. And honestly, we were just trying to figure out a way to categorize review times. And just for using a term, we said buckets, and it's stayed. It's been that way for about 2 years now. So we're just going to call them buckets. And really what this is like our record types or our permit types. And we have something that's over the counter. We have a fair amount of those that go very quickly. Then we have another grouping that is within the 5-day time frame, a 10-day, and then a 21-day. And a 21-day includes, even large commercial. And once again, as you probably know, that's a goal. We get there most of the time, but we can't get there all of the time at this point. But that's absolutely what our goal is. And then the other visual on the top just shows kind of, let's just say, we wanted a 10-day review. And then for whatever reason, we have one of the work groups that's at 24. We've got another one that's at 12. So we're missing that mark. And by being able to categorize this and being able to, have the data on this, we're able to find out what that is. That might be a staffing issue. They may have had one person retire and somebody else leave back into industry. And that's a struggle that we're going to have to figure out and work through and find that, that's probably a not long-term solution, but there may be other things that's creating a long-term solution. And then it would be our goal as a development regulatory side of it, and then also within that work group to figure out what that solution is. And next slide, please. I just kind of bolded a couple of key things here. We have a couple of pieces of legislation. The top one is session law. So the bill passed, it went into law. It's 23-142. What that's going to do, and if you look at the term, it says local government must, and that's underlined because it says local government, not the permit department. This is pretty significant legislation, and there's one that's going through right now that will probably be finished tomorrow at the Senate level. So a local government must, within 45 calendar days, do an approval. And so that's pretty significant, right? So that's not just my plan review team. That's everybody else, right? That's if it's commercial, that even includes, if you notice on that satellite, there's some Buncombe County components, right? And so that's all the facets. That's our public works. That's planning and zoning. That's building safety. It's a lot of different facets. Right now, they are saying a local government. So that's basically everybody. And what their goal is, if you don't hit that, then they're going to actually start reducing revenue. They're going to start reducing basically our permit fees, and it's a pretty significant run. Now this comes into effect July 1. The pre-submittal meeting is not too big of a deal, but the other thing is an at-risk foundation where they're actually splitting this, and this most recent bill 166 also talks about this, is where they're splitting where there's not a life safety issue. So what that basically means in the legislators' terms is if it's not a building or fire thing, if there's potentially a zoning thing that's not done, that then it's okay at the applicant's request to issue an at-risk permit foundation. And then the next piece with that is an at-risk structural foundation. So they're going to be going on and doing work while there's still a couple of things that have not been approved, which is pretty significant. The logistics of that, if that starts happening a lot, is going to be pretty difficult. They're also allowing for a third-party review. Architects and engineers can start doing reviews, and then there's a timeline to that. And then at the bottom of that slide, there's another bill that that didn't finish last year. It's going to be reintroduced this spring. We're already here. That actually has a private plan review and inspections, but it also identifies that it should be 21 business days. The one that's actually session law calls for 45 calendar days. There's a little conflict that they have to clean up, but that's something that we're good with the legislators on cleaning that up. So next slide, please. So what do we do from here? We had our kickoff meeting with our software company, Clarity, in April, and right now we're identifying our work groups, which SMEs, our subject matter experts, within all the different departments. We've got multiple pieces from many departments that are part of this in order to make this successful. We have the vendor coming into town in June. We're going to have a sit down with them and then finalize our timeline and milestones for that. And next step, please. Next slide. And then back to our takeaway. Once again, we were established for that reason, to be a convenient place for our community. We've realized through the pandemic the need to really step into the current day and what our future looks like. And then a couple of different aspects, creating a customer service, creating a type of customer, and some minimum requirements for what timelines look like is where we're going from here. And next slide.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. That was very interesting, and I like the efficiency of it. And I'm just going to ask you, because it's so efficient, it looked like it would take, it could possibly, we could operate with less staff by implementing these systems. Would you say that?
Yeah, and a great question. So the trick right now is that we want to basically identify, while things get better, where we can allocate the sources, because right now we have people that have so much they can't even do what they need to do, and we have people that can get there in the right amount of time. And if we can level those two out and basically create that point of contact, then the real key here is to be able to identify and allocate the right duties to the right resource. And that's really where this should balance out. And that's kind of what we would like to be able to do. We're starting to see a little bit of that happening with, of course, kind of the big word is collaboration, where interdepartmentally or even within work groups, we're finding where we have resource availability and then resource overload, where people can't do really what their minimum requirements or expectations are. And the whole goal here is to really kind of put that onto a flat line. That's, we have a little bit above, we have a little bit below, and we want to level that out. How that translates into the future of efficiency, I think that's still yet to be seen.
Thank you. Sage?
Thanks, Mark. This is exciting.
Very exciting.
Exciting to have more options, right? And I'm excited really about the different kind of working group and working representative options. I've got a question for you procedurally. Maggie and I were in another meeting earlier today around affordable housing planning and getting affordable housing across the finish line and so on. And I'm curious, we used a couple examples of projects that didn't quite get through, and maybe some of the reasons were how they approached it, like different phases and different levels, or split it up or didn't split it up, or, you know, brought too many parcels together. So the pre-application process, like, I love how you're getting down to smaller things where people can just really get a working representative to say, hey, can I even build in my backyard? But on the larger scale, what are the options for larger projects for pre-application or pre-submission? Is it just one meeting, and do you have to be a certain threshold to do it?
There, yes, and you're slightly out of my level of expertise. So,
Sorry.
so yes, and that's fine. And we're going to hit that a little bit in this slide, in this presentation coming up, right? So we've got kind of the second half, and so I'm going to touch on that. I don't know that it's actually going to answer your question, but it is, what it is going to identify is that there are conversations, and we've had a lot of conversations, and we talk about it on the Mississippi Middle. How do we jump people into a kind of a faster piece, or are there things that we can take away that we're already doing that aren't going to have a significant impact on the final result? And I think that is part of it. But to your question, yes, there is a threshold for what that pre-application meeting looks like.
I wonder more and more with these affordable, and maybe you're going to talk about it. I actually stopped at the question slide and didn't see the last 6. I just keep seeing it time and time again, like these bigger, larger affordable housing projects, had they approached it differently or had different direction in the beginning, they might have gotten further along. But maybe you're about to speak to it and I didn't realize.
I will hit something on there in this presentation, and thanks for the trigger on that, and I'll pick that up and speak a little bit that I think what our concept is, or what we're planning on doing, might actually help. There may be a piece from A to B that actually calls that out, right? That part of that, where that complication comes from. So I'll show that when it comes up, and I'll speak to that. Okay, so is that it for the 2.0 update? We'll go on to our next half here, is prioritizing affordable housing, and our key takeaways there is that, you know, obviously we already do that through many pieces and many aspects. We'll touch on that here in a second. The current prioritization process is informal and somewhat limited by resource, process, and technology. And then once again, our software is going to greatly help us to do that and create a necessary foundation to create a more formalized expedite process for priority projects. And next slide. And once again, we have informally prioritized projects for, you know, many years. I've been here 17, and we've always had some version of what that looks like. Really what we run into is we do find barriers into a formal expedite process. And, you know, staff turnover, of course, is the one. Staff capacity to even do that. So if we're running a full plan review team and we're already at 100% of our timelines and getting that, to actually build that other piece in there that pulls them off of that, always a complicated piece. Our software limitations are there, for actually just our one. For our development services, working in our current Acela is our permitting software. That's fine, but what we really want to do is we really want this to be a citywide connection. And so that's where the limitation, when we say software limitation here, that's what we're talking about, is how do we connect all the way from CED all the way to our final issuing of a CO, and I'll hit on that a little bit. And then collaboration, and that's really about internal collaboration. And once again, while we do reach out to other departments, and we do that commonly, what happens is almost to the first bullet point, or the sub bullet point there also, is the staff turnover, where we may come up with a good concept and we may have something that works well for a year, 15 months, and then somebody in that link moves. Right, and they go either to a different department, or they move on somewhere else in the industry, and then it kind of collapses. And so we want to be able to figure out that we want to avoid that from moving forward. So next slide, please. But I do have some examples of recent, what we've done is prioritization and had good success with that. Maple Crest at Lee Walker Heights. And that was, what happened. We had early conversations with CED through that entire process. The design team, a lot of that team, we know they were local. And so we were able to, they could just randomly ask questions, way early on. Also a contractor that we've known and done a lot of these type of projects with, we could have those early, and Mountain Housing as well. They reached out and they said, hey, here's what we're going to start doing in 6 months. What does that look like for you guys? And how does that timeline look? And next slide. And we did a lot of early pre-development project conversations way early on, prior to, coming to council, prior to coming to the, DSD for permitting. We developed something that works relatively well called a page turner, where basically we asked the architect and a couple of their people to come in, and our building plan reviewer and fire plan reviewer sit there and go through it. And then another day we made the electrical engineer team to come in, and our electrical plan reviewer will go through it. And so that's helped in times when we can't actually commit to a full expedite, but we can actually still prioritize and work one-on-one and find what we think are going to be the big issues without actually having to send them in and wait through the process. And then a part of that is both early on, prior to permitting and at permitting, is participating in those team meetings. And those are the meetings that the contractors will set up, and before the contractors on board, that the architects and design team will have, as well as the owner or their customer. And next slide. Another good example, a very similar concept was the concept as far as prioritizing, was Compass Point. Once again, we had a local team, both contractor and designers. They reached out in the development, in the design stage. And before they committed to drawing something, we were able to sit down with them and talk through, where they could be, what options they had, what hurdles, and things that were coming up from that existing building, converting that into a new one. So that was super helpful in doing that. Next slide, please. And so I talked about, well, let me just say, so expediting, right? So where do we go from prioritizing to expediting? We do have some concepts that we really want to put together. This is an example of that dashboard that I was talking about. So the customers, the community can see it from that side. We'll see it from that side. But we're really trying to develop and is working with all our different work groups, working with all our different departments as to what that connection, how do we put all those dots together to make a very linear process that can be picked up at any point, and it can be picked up from any person that gets seated into that point. Next slide. And so a lot of the pieces evolve around what we talked about, the implementation of policy and regulatory changes, both within our ordinances and then, kind of outside our control, create a framework to better align the development review process and council priorities. So right now we talk about affordable housing, but we're also really pushing this around. What does it look like for other council priority projects, right? So we're picking up recommendations from the housing plan, the missing middle, that's going to help to formulate this. And kind of to where you're going with this, and review the entitlement process and its relationship to non-discretionary development review process. That second bullet point there, that's a conversation that you've probably all experienced over a broad span of years, right? And so it does come up a lot. We've never really figured out how to get it to where, I don't know, to get to where it's not right now. If it's a barrier or it's a hurdle right now, we haven't reduced that barrier or hurdle at this point. And then interdepartmental collaboration to operationalize the improvements and make better use of technologies. And that's a matter of, the idea here is from day one, if somebody comes and speaks to CED and says, here's my plan, somehow we can document that into our new software and let that go from there. And a lot of times there's some level of anonymity to that. So they don't want to know, they don't want that address to be out there. They don't want that location to be out there. And that's fine, right? We can have a way, we can have it, Project X came in on May 13th and started this conversation, right? And, because obviously everything that we do is public record. So if they don't want that to come out, but there is still a way to do that. And as that evolves, then that can actually grow into, we can define that within that software, define what that project is. And Sage, to your earlier question is this is where that can come up, right? And they can say, hey, this sounds a lot like, Project Y from a year ago. And that one didn't work out. So what was the missing piece from your conversation with me from day one to whatever that next step looks like? And we can kind of evaluate what that was, and then from B to C, what were the blocks there, and we can kind of have that. At least we have that knowledge and that data. Right now, we can't collect that, nor do we really categorize that anywhere. And so, kind of picking up this new software and including all the other development related departments into that will help us be able to see that all the time. And next slide. And once again, back to our key takeaways, we've always had some version of prioritizing, relatively an informal process. And we have, identified barriers. There are always going to be barriers. We're hoping as we move into this new software, and by no means am I saying the software is going to solve this, because that's not the case at all. It's just going to help us. It's a tool that's going to help us. We're doing a significant amount of groundwork literally every week to build what this looks like, working with the work groups, working with the subject matter experts that are going to help us develop the software, but also help us develop the operational piece. And that's really an important part for us. And next slide. There might not be another slide. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Sage, I'm quite sure you have some questions.
I do, but I guess one thing that comes to mind too is in the past we used to do these development forums. It's the second time I've talked about this today, where we'd hear from developers what things were making it hard for them to progress, or what were their challenges before and after, whether or not their projects fell through. One of the things we commonly heard about in affordable housing developments was the time limit on a city inspector allowed to be on site. Does anybody remember hearing this? Do you remember it was Jeff Stottinger, when he was getting ready to leave the city, he met with 50 different housing folks and compiled like this list of things that were populating to be pretty common things, slowing the process down. And this was one of them. And I bring it up because I wonder if we just kind of lost it in the shuffle, or if that's something we should be looking at, but more so because this is great, but I wonder if there's more we can be doing, and if we need to bring back these like developer input sessions to hear more. Because Mark, what I mentioned earlier was kind of foreshadowing to this. We have a project in the community that has fallen apart because of the way it was brought to the city. It was structured funky, and it could have been different. And it wasn't city's fault. It wasn't anybody's. It was really the applicant's fault. But, to the end that the housing wasn't built, that's not a good thing for anyone. And had there been some additional pre-app meetings or some kind of input, I guess it could have gone differently. And so I'm trying to figure out how we massage that a little, and how we continue to get input from the development community on what's not quite working. This is obviously a great step, but I just wonder if there's more.
There's always more. I'll jump in. This developer forum idea, I think, is really interesting. I think that there could be more. I think that this is pretty awesome progress, but I think that part of what's also nice of a developer forum is that it's a two-way conversation, because there is so much that you all have been doing, already do. I'm constantly reminded where I'm like, we should do this. And you're like, we have been doing it for 5 years. I'm like, that's right. And so this forum can be a conversation. So folks who are really at, the permitting office every day, they already know certain stuff, but it can be a conversation, a back and forth. And I think that would help us as policymakers have like a reality check on the awesome work that's been done, the gaps that seem most concerning or emergent, or like where the low hanging fruit is. And it's, just like you said, Mark, the tool won't solve it all. A forum won't answer everything, but I think it's an interesting conversation because you, Mark, have all those relationships and you have a pulse on that. But I think this could also help the electeds come into the conversation as well. So just want to chime in that I think I'd put time into it. You know, I'd bring the donuts or whatever. I think it would be really neat. In addition to being pretty excited about the update and the depth of info that you're providing us today, Mark.
And also, if I remember correctly, Mark, this software can be adapted. So if we do have those sessions with some of the builders and developers, we can actually sort of tweak the software to actually adapt to that, right? Which is good because I think it's
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's why we really picked this one, and we went through a huge vetting process. And honestly, we ended up down to the wire with a very large typical enterprise product, and then this one that's a super agile product. And I'm not going to say took a risk. I guess you always take a risk when you're doing a big contract, but we went this direction just because of that ability to do that. And we don't want to basically change, on a whim, but as we start seeing patterns and movements, we want to be able to have that ability to do that. And that allows us to really take shape of that and gives us internal control of what that looks like and how to maneuver that around.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, we'll move on to public comment. Katie, do we have anyone on the line?
No, we do not.
Okay. That being said, if anyone else would like any comments before we adjourn? If not, thank you, everyone. Great conversation today.
Thank you all.
It's okay. Bye-bye.